So maybe a different way of putting this, as opposed to reference talking about Enlightenment philosophy, is to say the West has had to make this. The West went through some form of a recognition that the Western frame of reference is not the frame of reference, but a frame of reference. And I think a lot of people in the West we're not quite sure how to deal with that.
We still aren't.
Yeah, which leads to a lot of conflict. And one way of
doubt.
Yeah, and one way of dealing with that is to say that our way is right and everyone else's way is wrong, and we need to enforce our view on the rest of the world.
Yeah. And then you get a kind of ethno-fascism that can develop out of that.
Yes, and that doesn't work.
Well, that's got its problems, let's say.
And another way of dealing it that is equally bad is to say, well, we need to dissolve. We have an identity crisis as a result of this. And so maybe those guys are better than we are. And I think the appropriate solution lies in the middle. The golden mean is to say that we have a particular frame of reference, and we see that in South Africa all the time, that there's a Western frame of reference, but people who aren't Westerners don't have that frame of reference. And one practical example in South Africa is property rights. So we believe in individual ownership of property.
Because we also believe in individuals.
Yes, but the Zulu culture is much more one that emphasizes a monarchy and communal ownership of land. So the king owns the land. And I don't think the correct way to deal with that is for me to go to the Zulu people and say, you guys are wrong, you need to change your culture, you need to adopt our way of thinking. And it's not that easy to navigate. And I think that's why South Africa is such an important case study for the world, because we have these communities living on this piece of land. And how do we deal with that? Because people think about things like history, as we mentioned, differently. They think about things like property rights differently. They think about ownership and so forth in different ways. And the appropriate way to deal with that is not to try to enforce your way of thinking onto the other, but to try to find a way where there's mutual recognition and respect between different perspectives.